Okay, good morning, Asha. So we're just going to start in with questions. We have a lot of them. And if you also have questions, you can put them in the, I'll just come and say, hello, I'm the person speaking in the back. Okay.
This is Ishani, and actually you owe her everything. If it wasn't for Ishani's dedication, skill, and wonderful friendship, none of this would be happening.
Asha wears the blue because she's a nice Swami. That is, do you want to answer why you wear the blue?
This is um, traditionally Swamis wear orange. There's a traditional Swami order that's been in existence for centuries. You see all the Swamis in India wearing orange. My teacher, Swami Kriyananda, decided that order needed to be renewed. And so he created what he called the new Swami, not the new Swami order, which is what the word Naya means, Naya Swami. It's the same principle of dedication to God and to truth and to being an instrument of the light, to living very lightly in terms of this world, making our real home and commitment to a higher dimension of reality than just the world we're living in. Orange has been the color of burning up all your attachments, which is an essential and powerful spiritual practice. Blue is the color of Krishna consciousness, of Christ consciousness, of the infinite freedom. So Swamiji felt that the affirmation for our age is not so much what we're turning our back on, but much more how we're embracing everything as an expression of the divine. So he changed it to the blue color. So I've taken a very strong life vow that makes me a Naya Swami, and I dress accordingly, primarily to remind myself. But the simplicity of it, I must say, I've been doing it about 15 years now. External signs of internal changes have can have a very positive effect on affirming what it is that you believe in and that you live for. And the blue is like this. I have to add, the taking of the Nayaswami vow in 2009 was for me self-evident. I'd already been living this way for decades, and it was exactly right. But I was very attached to my wardrobe. I had beautiful clothes, and I had many, many colors. And the only thing that really took me any time, it only took me about 3 days, but it still took me 3 days. I had to just accept that all of that was behind me, and I just had to go forward. So I took everything that I had, jewelry, scarves, shoes, all these different clothes. I put them in the guest room of the house that I live in. I put the note out to the community that everything was in there, please come and get it. And in about 24 hours, it was gone. And then at first, I would see my pretty things walking around, and I would say, oh my, that's so pretty. And then I'd realize, oh, that was mine. That's why I was attracted to it. It doesn't happen so much, but it still does. And I still have the affection for it, but I no longer have the attachment. So we can all change once we set our minds to it. Okay, what else?
Okay, so the first question that we have,
Uh-huh.
and we have lots and lots of questions. The first question that we have is, can we change our karma?
Karma is a pattern of energy that causes you to respond in a certain way. And we are a constantly changing pattern of energy. That's the nature of energy itself, is that it's not fixed. We tend to think of things as being like hard, like this cup and banging on the table, and they're separate. But even these are just patterns of energy, but they're very fixed. Within us, we have our chakras. Our chakras is the energy pattern. They're vortices of energy that repel and attract. That pattern is entirely self-created. It's created over many incarnations, however. So the patterns build up and the magnetism builds up. But and we don't necessarily remember how we got there. So what we're always dealing with is let's say we want to change in a certain way, and we put out a certain amount of energy in the new direction, but it meets all of the energy that we've already put out in a perhaps contrary direction, but it is just a relationship of energy. So we change in proportion to our ability to generate energy in a new direction until the greater force of energy not only does it overwhelm, but it actually transforms the other energy into itself. This is how an unmagnetized piece of steel becomes magnetized. You put it next to a magnet, and its molecules rearrange, and it becomes like the force, the greater force. That's exactly what happens to us. We change our karma by awakening. Some part of us awakens to the fact that another way of living would be more pleasing to my heart and to my spirit. And then we begin to put out energy in the new direction, and simultaneously, as much as possible, stop putting out energy in the opposite direction. And depending on how committed, how many lifetimes, how many vortices of energy there are in your chakras, pretty soon, depending how long it takes, depends how much energy you put out, pretty soon the balance shifts and suddenly you're on a new trajectory. In theory, that transformation could take place in a split second. And that's what looks to people like a miracle. But it isn't really a miracle. It's just the capacity to put out so much energy in a new direction that the habitual energy is converted and gives up and becomes part of the new way of flowing. So the more dynamically we work at our new commitments, the more powerful and quickly that transformation will come, plus the grace of God, and the grace of the Guru. Because the masters can take on our karma in this sense, which is, well, let's say, think of it like this. When you do something at a certain point in any incarnation that is dissonant, that is not quite in harmony with your own highest good, it's exactly like sending a boomerang out. The Australian boomerang, where you throw it and it goes in a long arc and then it comes back to you. But you can put out a certain energy that is not in harmony with your best interests, and then it may take a long time to come all the way back to you because of all the conflicting energies. Nobody is entirely bad or entirely good. There's lots of conflicting energies. By the time the boomerang makes its circuit and is coming back to you, you may have changed to such an extent that you don't need that same lesson with that same force because you've already learned it in other ways. And even more dynamically, if you have become a disciple, if you have become a devotee, if you've understood the power of God's grace in your life, by the time that boomerang comes to you, the whole atmosphere around you, the whole force field, your whole aura has been shifted by all the changes. So several things can happen, several images can explain it. When a meteor enters the atmosphere of the earth can break it apart. So a large meteor coming into the atmosphere may be a few small stones by the time it hits the earth. So if our aura has shifted and the lesson that boomerang represents has largely been learned, our aura will burn it up, most of it. And maybe, for example, the karma might be that we would break our arm and instead we'll bruise a finger. Some of it will still touch us, but it's been burned up. Or if we have learned the fundamental lesson of life, which is the necessity for a guru, the necessity to be devoted to God, the need for a teacher, which is a fundamental truth of spiritual understanding, and we have become disciples. First, we have become disciples, which means we are humble in the face of divine wisdom, and we have a guru. The guru sees that boomerang coming around, and he just stands in front of it and takes the force. This is what it means when they say the guru takes on the karma. Takes the force of the boomerang, and simply there's no need for us to have it anymore because the lesson has been learned. Karma is unlearned lessons. Then the need for a guru is a lesson that has to be learned. And if it's already been learned, there's no point, there's no need for the karma anymore. So the guru intercedes. This is, among many things, the great blessing of having a God-realized master as a teacher.
Thank you, Asha. The next question is, what is the deeper meaning of mental illness?
Mental illness is really quite a complicated story, and there is no dogmatic answer to it. There's no, this is what it means, because everybody's karma is individual. But here is the fundamental reality, fundamental understanding of mental illness itself. There are basically three levels of consciousness, and they're degrees of separation or union with the greater reality. Subconsciousness is our entirely subjective world. I'm using that word not exactly as psychologists use it, but in this context. Subconsciousness is our entirely subjective world. Subconsciousness can be sleep. So we go into sleep, you can have vivid dreams, you can have the people in your family doing all sorts of things with you, big experiences. But when you wake up, nobody has had that experience but you. It was a completely real experience, but nobody could share it. The nature of subconsciousness is that it's isolating. The superconscious mind, the opposite end of the spectrum, the three, is where we begin to understand that our separateness is an illusion. It's the fact that we live, if you put it like this, that we live at the tips of our fingers and we seem very separate from each other. But if you travel to the origin point, you realize that all of these fingers emanate from the same source. And so if we live at the tips, which is subconscious more, we might be able to see each other, but we still are isolated. If we come to our superconscious self, we see the how we're unified, and then we take that sense of unification down to the individuality. But then even in our individuality, we feel this sense of union, this compassionate understanding, and we have a shared perception of reality. We see how everything comes together and how all this separateness is an illusion. Now, the conscious mind, which is when we're basically awake, is the battleground between these two forces, between the feeling of acceptance of a reality that is not self-created, that is divinely existing, and subconscious is to retreat into the world that is just defined by me and is shared by no one else. Mental illness is a retreat from this greater reality into this limited reality. You know, in this, it results in things like depression, despite external circumstances, paranoia, interpreting other people's actions in a certain way and insisting that this must be true. Now, bear in mind, the person who's in this state is actually having this experience. It's not like they're not having it, but they have focused their attention on a level of reality that does not connect with a greater reality. So there is a very understandable reason why people retreat into mental imbalance. And I talked to Swami Kriyananda at length about this at different times, and there's a point where you begin to wake up enough. You begin to sort of, your past lives accumulate. You've had enough experiences, and you begin to realize that there's no way out of human existence. There's no shortcut. There's no easy way. There's no guarantee of the happy ending. There's no promise that you'll never be hurt. That the only possible solution for this desire for happiness is to transform one's consciousness and to become master of one's own responses and to be able to act in relationship to this greater reality. That is a terrifying realization, especially at the very beginning, because how am I going to do that? I want an easier way out. No, this can't be true. And and we retreat. We just look for an alternative, or we just hide from the tremendous responsibility of awakening into God realization. Swami Kriyananda went so far as to say that mental imbalance is an inevitable stage on the spiritual path, which is, I'm just going to see if I can just create my own world, and then I just don't have to deal with any of this anymore. I just go like this. Now, bear in mind, often this is a terrible experience, but the terribleness of this experience at a certain stage still feels preferable to actually facing the enormous task of self-realization. And so we experiment. The one of the many principles of the spiritual path is that you have to learn for yourself. You can't have somebody just tell you. You have to have the experience. And for many people, mental imbalance is just something you have to go through until you have the courage to go past it. And then it becomes a habit. And then you have all these vortices in your chakras that gradually have to be overcome. I'm not being flippant about any of this. This is very challenging. But at a certain point, and it's a divine mystery, but at a certain point in your incarnations, you've experimented enough and you're ready to go forward. And you've tried it all. And mental imbalance is one of those things you try.
Thank you, Asha. Okay, so the next question is about masculine and feminine energy. What are they, and are they real?
Everything in the universe, everything in creation is dual. And that has a very profound metaphysical basis. There's the oneness of spirit. Everything comes back to the divine expression. There's the oneness of spirit, and this is how it's metaphysically explained. You know, the consciousness vibrates. In the Bible, it says the word, which is the sound of Om. Sound is a vibration. Silence is still. Sound is a vibration. Vibration goes back and forth. So once you're in the created material world, we want it to just go over to one side and stay there, but the nature of the word, which was in the beginning and everything was made from the word, is that it's vibrating. And when we go back into our divine center, we come into oneness and we come into stillness. But in all of the created universe, the opposites are what allow it to happen. The fact that there are men and women is because before there are men and women, there is masculine and feminine. There's feeling and reason. And the most powerful, best way to think about it is yin and yang. Because everything else creates all these prejudicial ideas in our mind. Yin and yang is a perfect circle made of two equal entities, little paramecium, that fit together and make a perfect circle. It's an ancient image from the East. Yin is receptive, yang is active. You know, yin is intuitive, yang is reason-oriented. But they go together to make the perfect circle, because otherwise they're just two random pieces that are completely out of balance. So masculine and feminine are defined in all the ways that they're usually defined. However, bear in mind, our nature is not either yin or yang. We are the complete circle. Each one of us is complete within ourselves. And the gender of the body that you're in may or may not define your orientation, but the body that you take is simply the starting point for you to become the whole circle. And it's within ourselves that balance finally has to happen. However, as we progress through life, through many incarnations, it's often helpful to be in relationship to that which is the balancing energy to what our own inclination is. This is why fundamentally, males are attracted to females, females are attracted to males. But no matter what the gender orientation is, what we are all trying to do is to become within ourselves a perfect yin-yang balance. And my observation of romantic partnerships is that the partnership works best if somehow between them they can create a yin-yang balance. And it doesn't really matter who is the yin and who is the yang. It also is in the most harmonious relationships that I've seen, the identification or commitment to which aspect of this you're going to express is very, very fluid. One household that I watched, both had an inclination to default a little bit to yang. And so the laundry wouldn't get done, the refrigerator got empty, the house got a little messy. But the two people had worked it out that whoever was capable in that moment, most capable of adding the yin balance, would just add the yin balance without bothering to have a big discussion about it or keeping score or anything like that. It was that we're working together to have a balanced life, and both yin and yang, which is masculine and feminine, need to be in place in proper proportion. So we just, each of us access the potential within ourselves depending on what life is asking of us. And if we're stuck in one side or the other, and then life requires something else from us, that becomes a profound and difficult challenge. If the one who always took care of everything becomes injured and now has to be taken care of, if the flexibility, if the fluidity is not there, traumas can result. But if the fluidity is there, we just say, well, these are just different forces. Different situations require different things of me. And the more androgynous we become within ourselves, the more capable and free we are to simply move through life responding to what life requires of us.
Asha, this is just really quick to go back. Someone just asked a question about mental illness that I don't want to spend too much time on this, but she asks, is it necessary to go through mental instability to become spiritual? And I just wanted you to clarify.
Well, Swami Kriyananda said something that was quite interesting in that respect. He didn't say it was inevitable, but he said it was common, because mental illness is one way of hiding from what life is really asking of you. And so it's a common response. It's a common, desperate response. But I brought that up to him because I noticed I observed in a number of people that I knew, when they started getting really serious about the spiritual path, instead of going forward on the path, they went backward into mental imbalance. In several cases that I know of, it was only temporary. But it was in that context that I asked Swami, I said, sir, this mental imbalance seems to be a direct response to spiritual awakening. And that was the context in which he said, yes, it can be common. You see the magnitude of the task in front of you and you run away. And the only way you can run away is to just blind yourself to the necessity, and that's where the mental imbalance comes in.
Okay, this is an interesting question that popped up. Why would one make an agreement to be the antagonist on this planet when it would create so much bad karma for them?
I'm sorry, I don't accept the premise, you see. One makes an agreement to sacrifice one's spiritual life by being evil. I think that there are a lot of things that people say and then they accept as true, and people with great sincerity and a great deal of wisdom. So I don't know who I might be speaking about, but people will say things that almost make sense. But then when you really get into it, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would someone, deliberately do evil things, hurt other people, store up bad karma for themselves, behave in a terrible way? Where is the value in this? what I think is trying to be said. And then you ask, why would they do it? Well, I can't say why they do it. It seems like a really crazy thing to do. I don't agree with the we made an agreement and you're going to be the villain. However, what I think is trying to be said is that these karmic relationships go on for a long time. And so you are drawn into circumstances where you're face to face with individuals expressing certain kinds of energy that is essential energy for your growth. And so that person expressing that kind of energy in the long run turns out to be a benefit to you, because the expression of that negative energy forced you, forced me to grow in ways that we would not have grown if we weren't confronted with that energy. So you can say on a certain level, it was a divinely orchestrated relationship that we had to be brought together because these were lessons I hadn't yet learned, but that someone else would actually sacrifice their own well-being and deliberately be a channel for darkness and a channel for evil, just as a nice thing that they would do for you. I just don't buy it. It doesn't make any sense. If a person loves you that much, there are many other ways that they could help you. But that there is some ongoing relationship that you're really working out, I think that part of it is true. I just don't accept that way of explaining it. You can even say it was in the astral world, we could all see that this was going to happen. But that's still quite different than, I'll be the bad guy this time, which is how I've had it presented to me before. If you love that person, if they love you enough and you love that person, you would say, no, don't do that. I'll figure this out in some other way. And just some other addition to that, if somebody has, let me just, what the words are. Okay, give me a second here. It's, if you have overcome the karma, but the other person hasn't overcome the karma, you are not stuck. You're not stuck with them until they also finish. That somebody else comes in who represents the same energy. So that's like, if you figured it out and learned it, you're not trapped by someone else's ignorance, because that's a level that people often ask that question. You get to go on to your next lesson, and they have to stay until they learn theirs with whoever is at the level that their karmas will match. That's really much more how it works.
Okay, how should I introduce my kids to these teachings? They're 10 and 12 and they've never been exposed to religion or beliefs.
Well, I think you should not be afraid to have serious conversations with your children. I think you should answer their questions with the best wisdom that you know. I don't think you should be the least bit afraid about, sharing with them either what you're studying and might be true, or what you've come to experience and know to be true. Children need some kind of a pole star to guide them through things. And goodness knows, if you're not talking to your children, everybody on social media is talking to your children. So if you think that they're sort of going to grow up like making their own decisions, they're being compelled in all kinds of ways without any context to it at all. So you need to present it in ways that begin to make, that depending on who your children are and what their receptivity is, you have to present it in ways that will make sense to them. For example, a friend of mine, her son came home and he'd been treated badly by another child in school who was a child he knew well, but the boy was just behaving very badly and the son was very mad about it. And so the mother let the son, be angry for a while. But then when he calmed down, she just started talking about the other boy who'd behaved badly, and I wonder what made him so upset. I wonder what's going on in his own family. And pretty soon, essentially, they were trying to see it from his point of view, trying to understand what might cause him to be unkind, thinking more compassionately instead of about anger, then talking about what you can do. I mean, just like in every way, try to elevate the conversation. Yes, this is happening. What are you learning from it? Yet this is happening. What is the best way for you to handle this? Yes, this is happening. What do you think it might mean? If there was a God and God had a plan, if there was reincarnation, who might you have been together? You just have to find the ways that interest the child and serve the child, what the child is looking for. And it's not always necessarily the most elevated. I had a friend whose children had certain talents, but they were getting distracted by um, social media, rather watching movies and going onto the phone. But one of the children was particularly attached to money. I said, why don't you pay them to do art? And he sort of laughed. I said, but yeah, if you pay him to do it, you'll be responding to what he is interested in, but at the same time, you'll get him to do a more elevated activity, and then he'll begin to enjoy being the activity, and he'll develop the talent, and maybe after a while, he won't be doing it for the money anymore, but the money will get him started. It's just like, realistically, that this teaching is what makes us happy and what brings us suffering, and to become more conscious of what makes us happy and what brings us suffering. You don't have to just start with the galactic gases and talk about the creation of the universe and the great masters, but children are really interested in that stuff. Superheroes, miraculous powers. Storytelling is one of the very, very best ways to get the children involved. Just get the most exciting stories from the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. In India, that's how children are brought up in the teachings, by the stories. Stories of the gods and goddesses and the heroes and the villains. And it's just such great literature, but it's always filled with righteousness prevails, wrong action brings wrong result. Think about it creatively, and not just in terms of orthodoxy that's for adults. Think about it creatively for children.
How do I know I am living in alignment with my soul?
The clearest sign of the presence of God is joy. Now bear in mind, joy is not exactly the same as pleasure and ease. Joy is, the word is ananda. We want words that, in Sanskrit, there are specific words that are much more subtle. You say joy in English and you can just mean, I got the new car, I won the lottery, which is not exactly the same as living in harmony with your purpose. But there's a feeling of rightness to it. And that feeling of rightness brings great joy. Even if there are challenges and difficulties and heartbreaks, it's a paradox. But underneath it, this feeling that I'm right where I should be, doing exactly what I should be doing. But you have to also understand that your purpose is not external. Your purpose is inner consciousness. So that the joy that I'm referring to is as you gradually develop the capacity to uplift your consciousness and to respond according to the principles of light and not be compelled always by the principles of fear. You have to experiment. You have to be courageous. You have to keep trying. But you also have to be broad. You have to be practical and sensible. When Swami was asked once, how can I tell what my karma is? He said, well, if there's a job to do and you're next in line. I mean, that's about how woo-woo he was about it. Wherever you find yourself, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. It's not that, oh, if I were somewhere else, I would be where I was supposed to be. No. The question is, where are you in your consciousness? Are you sad? Are you victimized? Are you low energy? Are you self-concerned? Or are you generous? Are you energetic? Are you creating beauty? Are you an instrument of kindness? That's what your purpose is. It's very objective. Am I acting to increase the light? Or am I always wondering about whether people are taking care of me? And no, it's not easy to reverse these things. And often circumstances are very dark. I mean, very hard. And it doesn't mean just because this is where I'm supposed to be, that this is where I'm supposed to stay. Oftentimes, the lesson is to just stand up for yourself, draw your boundaries, walk out the door and don't come back. But the purpose of your being put in that position may be to awaken you sufficiently that you will take the action that you need, or it may be to just stop imagining that you're going to be rescued and realize that I need to make the best use of what's given to me, because that is the only way I'm ever going to attract another alternative. One of the greatest laws of abundance is first is gratitude, and then after that is to make use of what's in front of me, instead of just saying, oh, I will be good when everything changes. No, no, no. I need to be good, and then everything will change. Good meaning I need to live in attunement with higher reality.
So Asha, let's talk about the need for a guru. So there's kind of two questions. One, do I need a guru? Why do I need a guru? And someone over here also asked, if I'm starting spirituality, how do I find a guru and learn clear yoga? So basically, do I need a guru, and what is the most dynamic?
If a person wants to learn, if a person wants to learn to play soccer, if a person wants to learn to play the piano, if a person wants to learn how to exercise at the gym, if a person wants to know how to put makeup on properly, we go to someone who knows how to do it, because there's just lots of subtleties to these. And when you're with someone who has who is skillful in the skill that you're trying to attain, it's not only that they can tell you specific things. You may be playing the guitar and you may have figured out some fancy way to hold your fingers, because what you're doing right now, that works fine, but you don't know enough to realize that this is never going to take you where you want to go. You have to, somebody who knows where you're going knows how you really have to hold the instrument. So there's countless things that are known by those who are more advanced than you that you can't just guess for yourself. And it's an age in which we're always seeking input, and spiritual growth is the most subtle thing that we're ever going to try to do. And we're trying to transform ourselves, and we're not always objectively able to perceive what the real issues are, because we're simply too close to it. And plus, we don't even know what the vibration is, because it's so different. Now, that doesn't mean you just run out and sign up with anybody. That is also irresponsible. What you need to become before you have a guru is you have to become a disciple. And to become a disciple means you need to be interested in learning. You have to accept the fact that I might not already know everything. Even though this is my own consciousness I'm working with, I have to recognize that not my judgment is not always the best. I need a perspective from someone who knows what's happening. So we begin to learn. And it's not always easy to evaluate the quality of a teacher, because we might not have the perspective to be able to be subtle enough to tell truth from falsehood, or limited teaching from comprehensive teaching. So one of the best ways that you can tell the quality of a teaching is by looking at those who are more like you, but who are dedicated to the practice and dedicated to living by those principles. Because if you see those, and again, you have to use your discernment, because not everybody who raises their hands or wears a sign is actually a good representative of their own path. But be discerning and look at people. If you can meet them in person, best of all, but examine the fruit of following this particular teaching. And if those people, or even just a few of them, represent what you want to become, you say, I want to be like her, I want to be like him, then that's telling you that this is a path that not only has the power to create something attractive, but also vibrates with who you are. They say every disciple of Krishna looks like Krishna. What they're trying to say is that every path has a vibration, and you're attracted to certain vibrations because they match your own. I am a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi, but I was not at all attracted to Yogananda or Autobiography of a Yogi at first. I found the book at a time when I was my first few years when I was mostly learning through books. And I read some of it, but it was too devotional for me. There were too many miracles. I was very intellectual. I liked Swami Vivekananda more. He was very brainy, and I liked that. Then I met Swami Kriyananda. And when I saw Swami Kriyananda, I instantly could tell, and this is what my inner heart said, literally, when he walked into the room. I said, he has what I want. And only later did I even identify what he had. He was joyful, he was free, he was courageous, he was humorous, meaning he was light, he took himself lightly, he was informal. I mean, there was no big story going on around him, any of that. And he just personified who I wanted to be. And he was a deep devotee of Paramahansa Yogananda. So I went back, and I loved Autobiography of a Yogi. I couldn't figure out why I didn't like it before, because meeting Swami Kriyananda attuned me to the vibration. It just changed me in some way. And I've seen many people who come on to the Ananda path or to any of the other paths that really have power. Very often you're attracted to the people who follow it, and then you begin to trace it back to the source of where they came from. And if you don't know that you need a guru, it's not time for you to have a guru. There just comes a point where you just realize, I don't know what I'm doing. I have to have a point of reference. That's what Swami Kriyananda has been for me, and through him, Yogananda. He's a pole star. It's like I can measure the rightness or wrongness or the truth of everything in relation to what I learn from him. And if it doesn't match, it's not that I mindlessly say, well, he must be wrong and he must be right and I must be wrong. I have a great deal of respect for my own intelligence too, but I can't say he's wrong either, because he's manifested to me a power, and that is as true today as it was when I was with him. He's been gone for 10 years or a little more from this world. But the consciousness is always there. The instruction is always there. And it makes me more myself, because I have a way of measuring. I have a fixed point of reference. Pole star is the word. And I can gauge whether or not what I'm doing is consistent with that energy. And of course, this is 50 years that I've been doing this. But at the beginning, this is just exactly what I did. Swami Kriyananda's own statement about coming to Yogananda was, I accepted what he said unhesitatingly, because his inner experience had given him faith in the Master, but not unquestioningly. Which is, I believe that there's truth here, but I don't understand it yet, so I'm going to keep using my own intelligence until I can come to understand it. And over decades for me, I've put many things on the shelf, and then over the years I keep taking them down because I've changed, and now it makes more sense to me. I don't know how I could have progressed at all in the spiritual path if there wasn't a force of energy, clear and powerful, bigger than my own ideas.
Thank you, Asha. This is an interesting question. How should we feel with all the suffering happening in the world at the moment?
Well, there's always suffering happening in the world. It's always been this way. This world has never been a heaven on earth. We just happen to be living in this one. And we happen to be, with all of our technology, we're able to see pictures, hear the weeping. It's horrible. It's just utterly heartbreaking. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the real solution? The first time I traveled out of the United States, I went to India in 1986. This was before India's great rise. technologically and economically. And I saw there a level of suffering and sickness and poverty that I'd never imagined. I'd never been out of the Western world. But I looked at it and I thought, we have all the technology, we have all the money, globally. None of this has to be so. So what is really going on here? And several things occurred to me. The main thing that occurred to me was this is just a matter of the human heart. Everybody's thinking in their own terms about their own welfare, in their own little universe, and so as a consequence, suffering happens because we just cannot be big enough to take care of everyone. But then I have to ask myself, who is in charge? Is there God? Is there a divine mother? Is there a plan? Is there a process that's happening here? These are very, very hard questions, but hard situations require us. We have to think deeply. We can't just think superficially, oh, it shouldn't be that way. They should change it. It should be different. They're terrible. Let me break them down and make them do this. What is the difference? This is just ego against ego. That's what we're watching. We're watching ego against ego. I want this. You have it. I'm going to take it from you. No, you're not going to take it from me. I hate you. I'm going to kill you instead. Where is the end of it? But there is an end of it. But it's not that this world becomes perfect. It's that one by one, souls awaken to a greater reality. And that pushes us toward reincarnation, that pushes us toward karma, that pushes us toward understanding the chakras, that pushes us toward being disciples. And if you're just caught up in everybody's suffering, all of this seems like a cop-out, an escape, an irresponsible action. But just try it. Keep trying to fix it. All of us have. We just keep trying to fix it. See what it does for you. See what it does for anyone. This world is not intended to be a paradise. This place is a school. And it's a very tough school sometimes. We are in a very, very tough program right now. And this program involves a lot of souls who have the necessity to suffer in order to learn, and a lot of souls who are practicing being evil and seeing if that's going to work for them. And there are evil, and evil does exist. Everybody is here to learn. So the question is, what am I supposed to learn? Why am I so afraid of other people suffering? Why do I not believe that there is a divine purpose to what's happening? Why do I panic when things threaten my own peace and my own security? Do I really believe in God? That's the only way to. There's no other answer. There's no quick answer to this. And this is what causes us to seek God. The story of the Buddha stands forever. The Buddha was protected from seeing the real nature of the world because the prophecy was either that he'd be a great renunciate or a great king. And his father was determined he'd be a great king. So he made a bubble of perfection around his son. But his son grew up, and his son went out and saw the world as it was. And he saw a dead person, he saw an old person, he saw a sick person, which he'd never seen before. And he found out, old age, disease, and death. This comes to all of us. So either life is hell and there is no God, and we should, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Or Divine Mother has a purpose here. And it's going to be a hard purpose to understand, but if I look deeply enough into the ancient wisdom and into myself, I will find it. And you can, and you will.
Wow, thank you so much, Asha, for that. Okay, so finally our last question, and I know there were many, many questions, and if you like, you can send them as a DM, and Asha will answer them for the Ask Asha. Not all of them, but as many as she can. Okay, so finally, the last question is, what is the most important thing we should know about living a fulfilling life?
That it's possible. My own name, Asha, means hope. And I've had this name for decades. And it only recently occurred to me that hope is a synonym for God. We know that we're meant to be happy. It's very interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot in the last few years. If we were meant to be unfulfilled and unhappy, we would be content to be unfulfilled and unhappy. I mean, it just wouldn't be possible. Most of us do not throw ourselves on the bed weeping because we can't fly, because we just know that we're not made to fly. And it's not a great tragedy to us that we can't just be like the birds. It's just not there to happen. But by the same token, even though we are often suffering, we are often unfulfilled, we are often disappointed, we do not accept that as our fate. There's a piece of us deep within that knows we were meant for happiness and fulfillment. So we just keep trying, and we just keep trying. Now, to really find fulfillment, you have to be willing to examine your first principles. And if your fulfillment is that I'm going to have this relationship, and I'm going to have this money, I'm going to have this home, and my mother is going to be different than she was, and my children are going to be different than they are. If it's just you saying, I want it to be different and this is how I want it to be, what we have to begin to ask ourselves is not merely, do I know in my heart that I was meant for joy? But we have to ask questions without insisting upon the answers. The mistake we make is that we sort of have our own plan and our own contract, and we just keep trying to impose it on the world, whether the world wants to give it to us or not. And we finally, after sufficient disappointment, you see, the trouble is suffering is a good teacher. It would just be so wonderful if that weren't true, but it is true. If you've made any progress in your life and you look back upon it, you will always see that the incentive that caused you to wake up was because you were suffering. And so when we are disappointed and are unfulfilled, we have to keep asking the questions, not just how can I keep banging my head against this wall, insisting that it should be a door, and just stand back and say, what is really trying to happen here? What am I being asked to learn? What is it within me that is confused about the very nature of fulfillment? Because oftentimes we're just like little children. Mommy, I want chocolate cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then mommy says, I can't do that, dear, because then you would not grow up big and strong. And then the child says, yes, I would. I want chocolate cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And Divine Mother, hearing us say, I want this, I want that, this is what I want, this will make me happy, she says, no, it won't. I'm very sorry, dear, but it won't. And this is where all suffering ultimately is there to lead us toward a right relationship with the divine, a right relationship with a reality greater than our own egoic preferences and made-up ideas about who we are and what will make us happy. And Divine Mother simply cannot, change divine law. She can't just give us what we want, thinking that it'll make us happy, because we insist that it will. Sooner or later, we try it out. Here's a very odd thing, which is we learn a lot from being disappointed, but we actually learn more from being fulfilled, which is why we persevere in these desires. Not because as long as we believe that I won't be happy until I get this certain thing, we will always be unhappy. So eventually we figure out how to get it. We get the money, we get the house, we get the power, we get the people. And we often get them eventually beautifully. And then what happens is it's still not enough, because the heart is restless until it finds its rest in the divine. And ultimately, we have to expand our sense of self beyond these little limited ideas. So just be brave, be expansive, be imaginative, be humble, be receptive, seek out wisdom, be open to learning, and make a relationship with Divine Mother. Make a relationship with God who wants the best for you. And when she seems not to have heard your prayer, you might ask a question. Why are you not responding? What is it that I don't know that I need to know? I mean, this is what we need to do. And ultimately, all the scriptures, all the saints, all the masters, all the ancient wisdom tell us, joy is our birthright. But we have to live according to divine law to have that birthright fulfilled.
Thank you so much, Asha. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions.